Do you remember back in the day, and I mean way back in the day, where you would bring your cat with you on your adventures? It was all the rage. I remember seeing cats everywhere back in 2005 and 2006. Nothing more iconic than a player in full mithril walking down the road to Falador with his pet kitten or cat in tow. Cats are an iconic part of Runescape's history, but do you know their story? Did you know that some cats were even people once? Well, let me tell you a tale that begins thousands of years ago in the desert, before it was even a desert, and spans across planets with gods, immortals, demons, and strange curses. Let me tell you the tale of the legacy of cats in RuneScape. Our story begins long ago in the Second Age during the Great War between the Kharid and Zaroshian empires. Zaros had established control over much of Gielinor already and sought to expand his empire into the lush tropical region of Kharid. During this time, this region was not the hostile desert it is now. Kharid was a lot more like the island of Karamja than anything else. It was ruled by Tumakan, the god of the sun, and Alidanis, the goddess of fertility. The two deities had desired children of their own, but in an ironic twist of fate, the goddess of fertility was not able to bear children of her own. So instead, they took a piece of their divinity and infused it with their closest companions, a dog and a cat. The dog would become Ichlarian, the god of the dead, responsible for shepherding souls to the afterlife, and the cat would become Amascut, the goddess of rebirth. These beings ruled over their lush and peaceful land for thousands of years, but due to this peace they lacked a military force to defend themselves, especially against the might of the now encroaching Zaroshians. The Zarosian military at the time was made up of Chthonian demons, an ancient race from across the stars on a planet known as Infernus. It is on Infernus that Zaros enlisted the aid of this ancient race by tricking their leader. These demons also brought their slaves with them, the Avernics, another race of demons. You can imagine the fear the Menephite pantheon felt at seeing legions of these demons at their gates. The Menephites amassed what soldiers they could to fight, but it was in vain. Zaros' forces were too strong, and so Ichlarian and Amascut set out into the cosmos themselves in hopes that they too would enlist the aid of someone or something that could help protect their lands. It wasn't long before the two gods set foot on the planet known as Runescape, a world that was home to one of the elder gods, Ma. Ma, although an elder being capable of creating life, was stunted in her growth and had the mind of an infant child. The story of Ma is for another time, but she crafted the primary race of beings that inhabited Runescape. These beings were known as the Majorat. The Majorat were immortal, and the only catch was that in order to keep their immortality, they were required to sacrifice one of their kind back to their creator Ma in an ancient ritual known as the Rejuvenation. The evolution of a race whose prime goal was to find a way to survive this ritual by any means necessary fostered a kind of ultimate Darwinian philosophy amongst the Majorat. They constantly sought challenges in the form of fighting, war, and deception in order to better themselves individually and thus avoid being the weakest link of their race, as the weakest member was always the one who was sacrificed. Ichlarian and Amascut were not particularly pleased with the Majorat's way of life and philosophy. but they knew that they were what they needed to defend their land from the Zeroshians. The Majorat agreed to fight for the Caridians, as it would, once again, be a way for them to strengthen and hone themselves. Ichlarian and his sister returned to Gielinor with the Majorat army in tow. Immortal warriors and tacticians who had lived for thousands of years made quick work of the demonic armies of Zaros. They pushed the invaders out of Caridian lands, and peace in the region was allowed to return. There was just one problem. The Majorat were beings of eternal conflict and warfare. Peace was seen as a weakness. This strained the relationship between the Menephites and the Majorat. The act that broke their alliance was due to a disagreement between Ichlarian and a Majorat known as Sliske. Sliske had used necromancy to create undead minions known as Wights and used them as soldiers in the war against the Zerosians. Now that the war had ended, Ichlarian, being the god of the dead, demanded that Sliske release the souls to the afterlife, but Sliske refused. This ended with Ichlarian taking Sliske's white army by force and then releasing them to the afterlife. The embittered Majorat now saw Ichlarian and the Menephites as his enemy and planned his retribution. Sliske met with the leader of the Zeroshian forces, a Chthonian demon named Duke Ceres, who offered him and the other Majorat the chance to be on the front lines of battle once again in their conquest of Gielinor. Over half of the Majorat agreed to this, as war was seen as almost a necessity, and they would now fight for Zaros. The first order of business? To return to the Menephite Empire and retake it for their new masters. This time, the combined might of the Majorat and demonic armies were too much for the Menephites. It was at this moment that Tumakin, the god of the sun, took to the battlefield, and despite the pleas of Amascut, he sacrificed himself and let all of his power be released in an enormous blast. It would be the second largest explosion on Gielinor to this day. The blast incinerated both the Menephite and Zeroshian armies. It incinerated the lush forests and tropical springs. It incinerated almost all life in the region. And in its place was now a vast and inhospitable desert. The toll paid by the Menephites was heavy, but Tumakin's sacrifice had now created a barrier that was difficult to pass through. The Zeroshian armies retreated, leaving the shattered Menephites to pick up what was left of their empire. Amascut was devastated by the death of her father. She had loved him and their empire and had traveled to other worlds to save it, and it was all for nothing, it seemed. The Zeroshian threat was gone, but their world was in tatters, and the lush world that had once been their home was now a barely livable wasteland of sand and wind. Her mind couldn't deal with the grief, and she snapped. Amascut forsook her title of the goddess of rebirth and instead sought to consume the souls of the dead, denying them the afterlife her brother Ichlarian led them to. Amascut became known as the Devourer. Amascut's priests and priestesses at temples devoted to her sought to reason with the now maddened goddess and told her that this wasn't what her father would have wanted, but it did not matter, and she slaughtered them and consumed their souls. The remaining clergy then cursed Amascut's name to be forgotten and banished her from her own body. She now couldn't maintain a corporeal form. In retaliation for this curse, Amascut cursed them back, transforming her former followers into cats. Ichlarian could not reverse the curse she had placed on these people, but he did the only thing he could to help them. He blessed them with immortality. To this day, Amascut fears cats, as you never know which one of them might be one of her former followers whom she cursed so long ago. These immortal felines scattered across the world over the years, and slowly the knowledge that they had once been priests and priestesses of an ancient goddess faded into legend, and legend faded into myth. Now the modern world has mostly forgotten about the origin of these immortal felines. When you finally meet Amascut, it's in a small tent outside the gates of Sophanum. She is simply called the Wanderer, and upon greeting her, your pet cat hisses furiously, somehow knowing her true identity. It is likely that most cats in Gielinor are descendants of these amazing creatures, and who knows, maybe even Gertrude's cat Fluffs is one of them herself. Not all of the former priests and priestesses of Amascut are lost, though. The cat Neat, former girlfriend of Bob the cat, is one of them. And as Bob and her wandered the world before Bob's passing, I suspect that Neat still kept an eye out for her old goddess, still very much in keeping with the task Ichlarian set upon her kind thousands of years ago. So the next time you need some death runes, or you're just browsing your bank and see your feline friend that you might have appointed to guard your valuables for the last 10 years or so, remember that you might be carrying one of the descendants of the immortal clergy of Amascut, a prouder race than most, and certainly deserving of a tasty sardine every now and then. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I said months ago that I wanted to talk more about the story of the desert in Runescape, and here it is. I normally don't go harping about likes in videos, but I am pretty proud of this one, so if I was going to ask for you to like a video, it would probably be this one. I'd also like to mention another YouTube channel whose content really helped me research for this video. It's called The Book of RS, all one word. And I'm sure some of you know about it, but it's really fantastic lore that covers the entire history of RuneScape chronologically. And it's beautifully narrated, so check him out. If you enjoyed this video, I guarantee you'll like his stuff. Anyways, I'm currently working on something, and it's left me feeling quite empty, so I better get going. I'll see you all very soon. Ciao.